And so he came back and he goes, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I did you." And I said, "Excuse me?" And I forgot that like sound guys and production guys, they're like, "Oh yeah," when they talk, they're like, "Oh yeah, I did that person. Oh yeah, I did Shaka Khan. Oh yeah, I did Harry Belafonte." And in this case, I was like, "What?" And it turns out he had been the sound person and tech person, actually a high up tech person for lighting and sound at Central Fly and Roxy. So he was like, "I did you at Roxy and Central Fly." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I got you." And immediately there was the sort of a click.
Today is October 28th, 2021. Who are we speaking with?
JEANNIE Hopper, Liquid Sound Lounge, coming at you from New York City.
Whoop, whoop. What is your intention when you DJ?
Ooh, to bring community unity together through music and dancing. And truly, as I always say on my radio show, to give us a mental realigning of our chakras and a break to feel ourselves as human beings, as physical beings. So to me, it's very freeing, it's uplifting, and it's truly soul alchemy.
Explain that. What is soul alchemy?
Where you unify people under a groove, to take a line from, the almighty master of funk and godfather, yes, George Clinton, one of my first and biggest influences. And yeah, may the funk be with you. It's sort of the same as soul alchemy. If you got the funk in you, you got to let it out, and it never goes away. It may ebb and flow and wane at times, but it never goes away. I feel like that's what house music and dance music and good soulful music is about too. It's timeless. So that's what soul alchemy is. And we're all so different in our lives, in our DNA, in our breathing, in our walking on this planet. And that's one place where our souls come together and connect. And we realize more than ever that we are a community and we need each other. And it feels good to be that tribe of beings as one. I truly believe that.
Let's start from the beginning. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in a little suburb called Hales Corners. And I was the fourth in the brood of 4 children. My parents were dancers, and my grandparents as well. My grandfather even threw dances in Milwaukee. He got bored, so he would switch around to different styles. He had a little portable turntable and 45s. And he not only would throw the dances, but lead and oftentimes show people the dances when necessary. And yeah, it's something that just threads through my family, where my parents and my grandparents both met dancing. The love of my life I met through dance. And
really? Tell us that story.
Okay. Interestingly, it was at a benefit for Hurricane Katrina that Kervin Marks and his whole crew put together. The name escapes me now, what the original party was. Do you remember that he was doing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. This happens to me a lot. I have like a compartmentalized brain.
Melting pot.
But Torture Soul was playing, Joe Llanos was DJing, a lot of us. It was at the former Sound Factory, that became Twilo, that became a Spirit. And I was expecting the usual sound person who had actually been an intern of mine under Liquid Sound Lounge on my record label to be there to assist. I just got finished spinning, and it turned out that with Joey and I had an amazing fun time. It was the first and probably I think the only time we got to DJ together thus far. And this sound guy came up to me and he's like, "Oh, okay, can I get you anything? Do you need anything?" And I was just like, "Well, you know, I'd love a drink," because it was very tight. There was no drink tickets. And that's fine. It was a benefit. And so he came back and he goes, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I did you." And I said, "Excuse me?" And I forgot that like sound guys and production guys, they're like, "Oh yeah," when they talk, they're like, "Oh yeah, I did that person. Oh yeah, I did Shaka Khan. Oh yeah, I did Harry Belafonte." And in this case, I was like, "What?" And it turns out he had been the sound person and tech person, actually a high up tech person for lighting and sound at Central Fly and Roxy. So he was like, "I did you at Roxy and Central Fly." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I got you." And immediately there was the sort of a click. And it turns out he's one of the original Richard Long associates. Yeah. He started when he was in high school as a kid, I think 13, 14 years old, just going into high school. And I really felt, I mean, as things evolved, it really felt like the powers that be in the disco party, dance party in the sky. I say disco as in dance floor, not genre specific. You know, unified us, brought our souls together. And we've been together ever since 2005. And we finally married in 2018, actually. That's right there, 8/12/2018, right?
Oh, nice.
So it's like infinity. I didn't put the year because I felt like we've been together forever. And that was interestingly his vow to me when we gave each other vows, when we exchanged vows. He actually said, he goes, you know, in the beginning, you know, there was house and the house had a groove. And that's literally, that was, so we have a true music connection. And yeah, and it's been a hell of a ride because he's also, you know, an audio engineer. He's part of IATSE, the, you know, stagehand union, theater and stagehand union. And then we became, which isn't easy, to work together and love together, personally and professionally. But I brought him in on Warm Up when I created the online radio station for PS1 and MoMA. And back in 2000, it was around the same time, in 2004. And then they asked me to, could I manage the tech for Warm Up? And I said, well, I could, but let me do it with, you know, somebody that I know can handle this, because he did everything from huge stadiums and rock concerts and I mean, everything. He had toured with Mamma Mia, he had toured with, you know, just, I mean, so, and for me, I've been an engineer since starting in radio and being self-trained, and even then moving into doing events and doing engineering for events, dealing with bands, so I have a lot, I have a big range of skills, let's just put it that way. So yeah, so we're still together and we made it through COVID. Still making it through COVID, I should say. It's not over yet.
A lot of relationships have not survived COVID. I've seen that all over Facebook. Yeah, you know, what an amazing story.
I've never shared that story. You're the first. Only personally I've shared that with people.
Thank you for sharing that story with me. Do you remember your first nightclub that you went to? And how old were you? Did you sneak out of the
Yeah.
house? Was
Oh
it one
my
of those
God.
stories?
Oh my God. Okay, so I was a big roller skater when I was a kid. My parents took me to Wisconsin State University when I was like 7 years old. And my parents used to dance on roller skates and ice skates, as well as you could call it ballroom dancing. It's a weird term now because it's become so glam. And of course, then, that peaked, and I was a boogie skater. I could jab, they call it jive and jam sessions, so I could get down. And but I remember I was like 16 years old, and me and a couple friends, it was, I guess, when disco was really coming in. Funk was on the radio, it made it on the radio. Some, hip hop that became pop, the first hip hop that became pop, made it into. But at the roller skating rink, I got to hear, of course, because of the DJ, a lot of underground music. Ton of underground music, and little did I know, that it was filtering in from New York, from Chicago, which was only an hour and a half south of Milwaukee, and even, I guess it was before the whole Detroit phenomenon, except for funk. Well, then again, I think George moved there later. He originally originated from New Jersey, from what I remember. Anyways, that's a whole other story. But yeah, we snuck into, there was a club that was called Tropicana, and one friend found an ID from Michigan that was totally illegal, but the picture was so generic that all three of us would use the same ID to go into the club. Like, we'd hang out in the car, and the first person would go in, and then they'd be like, oh, I'm going out to have a smoke, and then they would come back out. Okay, no, you go in, but wait like 40 minutes. And so it was a very different time. And also the age then for drinking, it was before there was a national age of 21, it was 18. So yeah, I saw things and partook in things that I was probably too young and shouldn't have been, but I did.
What did you see?
It's not really worth talking about. It's just like goofy things. Because when you're that young and you're like, why in that man's pants does it look like he has a pair of socks down his leg? And it was, like people would do padding, people would do, and it was like, okay, because it was those tight polyester pants. Anyways, just goofy stuff like that. At the time, I just for my age, it just made me laugh. But the first concert I went to, which I was not allowed to be going out to or doing any of this, by the way, was P-Funk, was the Atomic Dog Tour. I think I was, again, like 15, 16. And it's really interesting because this is in Milwaukee. So we went downtown. I forget what club it was. Might have been, it was called Park Ave, I think. And oh my God, the stage was awesome. It was like a wedding cake, different layers, and all the musicians were up on the layers. And I think me and my friend, and this is striking because I grew up in a suburb that was very white. It was during integration in the schools, so it was not very mixed at all. And I ended up, we ended up there, and it was, the significance of this is that there I was, me and my friend, and maybe two other people were white, and everyone else, was African-American. And for me, it was amazing because the things I started seeing in certain shows, or, I was like, this is real, this is reality. Like, I want to be around, lots of different people. Because I was always so curious and open and social. The significance of this is that fast forward to, I think, around 1990, and Ritz was in the old Studio 54. It had moved from, where Webster Hall was. And I had a chance, and it was my first big radio interview that I locked in with George Clinton. So we got to hang out in his hotel room with several band members. Jay Smooth from the Underground Railroad from BAI. His show had already started. Mine hadn't. Mine was about to start. I think my show started, Liquid Sound Lounge started like a year or two later. I had already been volunteering and producing for the station though. And dancing and music was my solace. So I got deeper and deeper in the scene, but this was exciting opportunity. And I remember then finally going to the show because it was like 2:30 in the morning. Like, when are you guys playing? Like, you're the headline. And so it was a classic, like Grace Jones move, right? Like, when is she going to show up? Is she? And so it was around 3 in the morning and he played, and it was so striking to me. I was like, oh my God, the majority of the audience is white. So it was a real 180 from what I had experienced. And again, being a journalist, I'm very observant. So when I bring up these details, it's significant to me. I think your place, your time, finally, I feel like we're finally breaking out. It's amazing, this next generation out of binaries. We're breaking out of what even who were considered progressives in the early 90s, would pan and not really talk about in movements, because I was a big part of reporting on movements and political movements in Central America and the Middle East. So these observances are very important to me, because the faster we get to unifying and being one world and realizing that, and how unique each one of us is and our differences, and we should uplift that and how beautiful it is, especially for those that have disabilities. This world is going to open up and be phenomenal if it's still here. So I'll leave it at that. Sorry. You know me, I'm always the one that's getting heavy and political with people.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Because I think music is that not only an elixir and an escape, but it's about messages in the music. And it's that alchemy, again, of the culture and the political that work hand in hand, that brings forth and moves forth change. So we need artists. We need culture. We will not advance. We will not grow if we do not have it. So each informs and pushes and pulls toward progress. That was my long story to your short question.
I love it though. I love it.
Classic Jeannie Hopper too.
No, I love it. I love it. I want to talk about journalism, and then I want to go into the whole backstory of Liquid Sound Lounge and how that came to be. But talk to me about being a journalist. Does that inform your DJing at all? And speaking as a journalist, how do you navigate situations where some folks are not great storytellers, or we've all been in like super painful interviews? How do you navigate that space?
The one word.
So, yes, it's maddening. How do you navigate that space?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
That was for you. That was a joke.
Thanks.
Well, number one, you have to be careful with your pre-interview. Sometimes it's better left to explore and have the spontaneity happen in the moment of your interview. So I'm sure you don't, and I don't usually have this. I don't have the luxury of having somebody else as an associate producer to do the pre-interview. But I think research is really, really important. And I think also the closer you are to somebody, it can land in that those difficult areas in interviewing somebody. Why? Because you know each other so well that sometimes they forget there's an audience. they're even more comfortable with you. So I think it's also about setting intention with regard to those possibilities that could come up.
Mm-hmm.
And editing help.
Yep.
And also I find like, okay, there's also this side of when you're dealing with interviewing people that are on a press, they're on a press tour or circuit, right? And so the marketing company and the PR company have all mapped out, okay, these are our points, these are our talking points. I think the difficult thing is to get an artist out of what feels like kind of stock answers. You know, they said it before, they're going to say it again. They're trying to get these sales points across. It's been drilled into their head by marketing and publicity to help with sales, find those sound bites. So I think it's about getting past that. And some, like one of the most, one of many interviews that I've conducted, there was one with Vusi Malasela. Do you know who he is?
Mm-mm.
He is like this incredible artist, but almost like I would say a Mariam Makeba. And when it comes to his lyrics and his presence for people, especially around South Africa. And so there was also a little bit of he was trying to, work his English. People get very self-conscious when they're not speaking in their native language. And even though you're fine with it and you're like, I really don't care if you get your pronouns right or anything. But it was like about 20 minutes in, and I was lucky to have a lot of time with him. And all of a sudden he just broke and he realized, oh, you actually really want to talk to me. You want to get in there. So, and the only way I could do that and break out of that kind of repetitive was to really do my research. And now it's so much easier because you have the internet. When I first started, there was no internet.
No.
It was more about music magazines and talking to a lot of people that might be in the same scene or in the same part of the industry, and then formulating questions.
Exactly.
And for me too, I mean, I'm lucky to have two co-hosts with Liquid Sound Lounge, Steve Marshall and Reggie Johnson. And they are literally, I call them my musicologists, because just like with Curvin's Party, I can't seem to, Melting Pot. See, now it came to mind.
Melting Pot, yeah.
Steve is very good at his memory is faster. In the meantime, while I'm engineering and hosting and DJing, there's a lot going on. So I guess those are my tips. And I think also you have to set an intention, and you have to set everything else aside in your world. You have to really be present with that person and respect that you have that time with them, and try to feel them on a energy level. Because you can shift people's energy even by just throwing them off with a question that's kind of surprising. That's what a lot of people do too. I mean, it's another trick, which is you ask them a question that they weren't expecting. Mm-hmm. Oh, so what did you have for breakfast this morning? And I feel like when you're doing your levels, when you're recording, and that's where it's kind of where you can warm up with somebody, and because your energy entirely affects who you are, how that person will react, especially when you can see people.
Yes.
Like radio is different when it's just audio. But even for radio, what you have to realize too is our voices are so revealing of our energy and our mood, our changes, where our head is at. And I hear it, and I'm sure you do too. When you go back to recordings after you've interviewed somebody, Moema, you're probably like, oh, my voice sounded so weird that there. Where was my head? Oh, that's right. I was dealing with X, Y, and Z. And, so there's a lot of work to interviewing. And yeah, and you've always had a very centered vibe to me.
Thank you.
You felt to me very grounded and centered. And whenever I would come across you at a party, it was almost like coming across a cousin, and that's how I feel for you and your energy and what I've always experienced. And I appreciated that. Just like, I felt like you were a kindred spirit. You were like, the photojournalist. Yeah, exactly. And you knew the nuances and the negative stuff and all the goofiness and, the scene is wrought with that too. But it's about kind of riding the wave over that and staying grounded and centered in the positive, which is not always easy because it's a tough industry. There's always challenges. The biggest challenge is to not direct when you're frustrated out onto somebody else when that ego comes up. And it's difficult because it's not a scene that's respected as much as it should be, for what it's contributed to, the foundation of building dance music, at least from where we're at in that foundation building, versus then a category called EDM popping up, and suddenly mega clubs closed in New York, which happened in Detroit way before, although it was warehouses, and it being co-opted into festivals, and which is fine. The business model always shifts and changes, but it leaves a lot of people very, a lot of uncertainty, and there's no roadmap of navigation, and it ever changes. It's almost like tectonics, like you don't know when the volcano's going to go off, or the earthquake's going to happen, or you just, a tsunami, it's unpredictable. So it's not an easy scene, that's for sure. And in our lifetime, transferring from, I always look at also music parallels technology, right? Just as here you and I are visually looking at each other, I did not jump into that during the pandemic, putting a camera on me, even though it's really interesting that the opportunity that's opened up for so many to spin and invite fans or build a fan base, through social media. It's a really exciting time. But, it's been a really tough time though, when it comes to where's the compensation for your talent, your work, and your craft, right? These platforms are extremely extractive. They're not giving back on the financial side outside of, hey, well, we're giving you this platform, so, you're lucky you have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not equal to what the tech industry has amassed as you sit there near Silicon Valley. Moema. I mean, we are in the tech revolution, deep in it. And I am so happy that I came into it knowing what it was before tech. And I'd imagine it was similar to what my grandparents felt like coming into the age of industrialization, right? And then a depression, and then workers' rights and rising up. And then, so we're in a similar time right now. And we're in a period too that a lot of people, I don't know that they're finding the language for it unless they seek or have found sources of independent media, real journalists on the ground that are reporting on actual systems of change that are beneficial for people as we head out of this neoliberal time. I say head out because I think we are. I think the pandemic has kind of put the cherry on the top of that when they talk about people don't want to go back to work. They're just lazy. They saved money during the pandemic. They didn't spend it, you know, and they're good. So how do we get them back to work? Because now, when will that money run out that they've saved in their coffers? And I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
But that's a different, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
However, what we are seeing right now, and I really feel like I wish that the music community, which is organizing and trying to find their space in equity, which I've been a part of even, especially during the pandemic. But what's going on, the real thread on that is that we have a dignified work strike. People are assessing their value with their family, their value with their extended family. What are they willing to risk in their lives? What are they, so I think it's sort of a restart, a reset for many people. And that's what it's about. And it's like, no, I'm not going to go back to that job. And many companies now have had to, especially in the service industry, increase their offering of what they're willing to pay. And some are even starting to offer benefits. And that's what should have been done anyways, since all this madness started, in the early 80s, as things got peeled away, the social safety nets that had been created after much hardship with the Depression. And where does that fit in with music? Just before the pandemic hit, I was part of a group that had created Music Workers Alliance. It kind of stemmed a little bit out of all of us doing our advocacy to end the cabaret law in New York City, something that I fought for almost the entire time since Liquid Sound Lounge started in 1993. A mayor named Giuliani had used it as a weapon, just as that sleeper law was used as a weapon against the LGBTQI community, which led to the rise up and the finally, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it, Stonewall. And before that, it had even come about, in the era of jazz and Harlem, and a way to, they didn't like the races mixing because when you separate people, they're less powerful. When people work together, they're strong. And so there's a lot of power in trying to keep people separated. And in this case, it was also about financial gain in terms of the city, and then the start of the overwhelming, excessive building of luxury housing, which is really a lot of investment and not really investment in community. And so one of the things we were working on was proper pay for an artist. Where can we get proper pay? When everybody's so anxious to get a gig anyways, they're like, what? Oh my God, this is a great opportunity, right? Well, you still should be paid properly. You still should be able to make a living wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because where else is it going to come from? It's going to come from your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we realized, this was a lot of the hard work of many people that had asked me to come on board and just be supportive and inform from my perspective. But the idea of the establishments here in New York that are subsidized by taxes, we could go after them through the city council.
Mhm.
And we could, get the ear of the mayor's office on media and entertainment and so, we brought people together from the Musicians Union 802, local 802 here, as well as the movement for affordable independent spaces to develop for people to create cultural spots. So, fair pay. And it was striking to me when the head of local 802 said, yeah, I'll go to X establishment. I'm not going to name them, but it was a prominent museum, and they're offering me the same amount for me and my band members to play as what I got paid in the late 70s, now in the 2000s. That has to stop. And I think that's a part of also what people are struggling with here in New York City and elsewhere when it comes to clubs. It's like, it's tough because you have to be organized to get paid properly. You have to unify together, and that's a difficult thing. So, yeah, sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. So Liquid Sound Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
Give us the backstory. When, where, why, and most importantly, what's been the secret of your success? Lots of radio shows have come and gone. Yours is still here.
Oh, I think it's still here because it's truly like you're still here, Muema. It's a labor of love. Yeah. It started as a love for the radio station I was doing political reporting on in Central America and the Middle East. And going out, as I said, music was my solace. And going to some of the bigger clubs, and then, because that's all I knew, and then people handing flyers out in front of the club before there was internet. You would find out about this party or that party. And then I found the great spaces. And then the arts director, I said, oh man, he's like, I want to go to some of these events. I want to go to some of these parties. And I said, okay, let's go. Come on, come with me. I mean, what comes to mind is really like House Nation, the Frankie Jackson Soul Kitchen, Chi-Chi and Johnny's. They ended up with Mother, but Jackie 60 parties. Giant Step started shortly after. I think around 90, it was Groove Academy, and then they created the moniker of Groove Giant Step. And through that, at the station then, and I did some stories, like I said, they did the interview with George Clinton, and I started contributing a little bit to the arts department, some pieces for the arts magazine, because I guess we call him the midwife of the Liquid Sound Lounge, because he was the arts director, and he ushered in and kind of was like, hey, you want a show? And I was like, I'm not going to do a music show. I'm doing political stuff, and I'm not a DJ. And he says, no, just bring together like you did in these specials. And I said, okay. So in the middle of the night, July 18th, 1993, I called it a radio party. It's really funny because some people actually figured out the address of the station and tried to get in to the building. They weren't used to somebody handing them a flyer about a radio show. And so that's really how it started. And I was very deep in the poetry scene as well. And I also was into, at that time, what was evolving into what was called the acid jazz scene, which is really just funk and soul revival and appreciation for what was being sampled and the records of late from hip hop and otherwise. And people exploring those originals and then having fun and creating new and then original music inspired by. that music. And so by October 93, it seemed apropos, the gospel show decided that they were no longer gonna continue. And that's when we got a 3 o'clock afternoon slot on a Saturday. And then slowly it pushed to, not too long, to 6 p.m. And we were at 6 p.m. for a long time. And also Saturday nights, weirdly, on WBAI was kind of a no man's zone. They couldn't figure out what to do with it. So they just kind of let the arts director figure it out. I guess he got carte blanche, Anthony Sloan. And who I used to do even a lot of theater, radio theater and comedy, actually, with. I used to do political satire skits and be different characters on a show called the Creative Unity Collective, which Daryl McNeil, many people may know. I mean, he became the head of programming for Brooklyn Academy of Music's BAMcafe. So it's definitely about who you know and through your life where opportunities come. So don't burn bridges, be kind. You never know who you're talking about or talking to. And from that, the show just evolved, and I felt a real need to bring forth the messages from the poets, because I was heavy at the New Rockin and University of the Streets that used to exist. And oh my God, the Soup. There was a lot of different poetry things going on at that time too, and people that really rose up. And I remember MTV had started Unplugged, and they even had the poets on, a poetry thing. And it was a really amazing time. There's that word again of alchemy, of artistry and crossover. So that's what I tried to craft and bring into the show. How am I going to bring poets, funk and soul, and house music? And me, it was all about new. I loved the new stuff. And I'm like, well, where are we going to have modern day class? How are we going to have new classics if nobody plays the new stuff? Even though I love classics, I love them. But again, I'm coming out of a different background, and I'm coming in at a different time than those that love the show have a lot more history on me in traversing the foundation of what we know as the club scene, from Nikki Ciano's gallery to, I don't know. I mean, I did go to a lot of these crazy clubs, but I was not at Mud Club. I was not at Area. I was not, these kinds of places until they morphed into other things. Although Dave Mancuso, oddly, I did end up at the Loft unknowingly. We would always be sent around the corner from Save the Robots. And I didn't know that was E-Man at the door at the time. He'd be like, no, you can't come in right now. Go around the corner. There's a place around the corner. But it was called Choice, I think, on Friday nights. I might be off on that. Maybe it was Saturdays was the Loft, or vice versa or something. And this was us seeking after hours, right? And loved it, loved the space. Really, I was like, this place is so amazing. Oh my God. I'm like, look, there's a bed there. And then later on realizing it was actually his home, and it was was on 3rd Street next to the New York Poets Cafe. And the gas station was across the street from Save the Robots. Around the corner was the World. Yeah, this is all in the East Village. And out of all of that, I just, being a journalist especially, I was just like, how do I piece this all together into something that orally flows on the radio? So it really, for me, radio is very different than what people think of commercial radio. We were lucky to have what we call freeform radio, thanks to Bob Fass, who created it and invented it on the station in the mid-60s, where he opened up the airwaves in the middle of the night when the stations used to go dark. And he says, they were like, no one's going to be listening. Why would we spend the money and have you here? And he created this incredible space, which you have to watch, Radio Unnameable, an amazing documentary. You will see some cultural moments in New York City. And
What's it called?
Radio Unnameable.
Okay.
And he passed last year, but his show continued since the mid 60s.
Gotcha.
That long. I mean, he had the top ratings against all the commercial stations. Now, mind you, there was only radio then and TV. And Bob Dylan would pop by, people like that, and it was a lot of politics too involved. So that's how the show started. And for me, it was definitely about bringing new people into the new listenership into the station, new supporters. They would come across the dial, trip across the dial, as we say, because it's finite versus the internet. And we're right in the middle at 99.5. So more than likely when you were traversing the dial, hopefully the music would catch your attention and it was something unusual and different that they wouldn't hear anywhere else. Now, mind you, of course, there was the Midday Mix with John Robinson. There was Tony Humphreys. There was a lot of radio folks out there. But some didn't take to my format, because what I called those other shows on commercial radio, I call those actual mix show format. In this case, this was more of a, a radio party. It was, so some people go, why do you have those poets on? Why don't you just play the music? Or why are you talking and interviewing these people? Why don't you just play the music? Because oftentimes the DJ wasn't the voice you heard on the air also. In those commercial entities. And I think the staying power is my actual passion and love for the scene, and then getting deeper in it. As I evolved, people heard me become a DJ. I had no mission to become a DJ, but it started to make sense because my main thing was that everybody was starting to send music in, and I would look at it like a puzzle. How can I fit as much in as I can, after sifting through, of course, to find what in my ears was a soulful, groovy sound. It had to have some sort of human element, whether it was an instrument or a voice. I like messages in the music. I love tracks, but I wasn't into fillers. So that's where I had fun with poets. And I'm like, oh, you know what? This will be good for you to put some words over. And I understood the poets had different rhythms and cadences too. So it was kind of fun producing in that manner of finding a musician and a track, and who would lead or who would, so it was really like live productions going on, performances happening spontaneously on the air. And then I got to the point that people were releasing their actual own poetry albums with music and musicians and finding their own way. And Mouth Almighty Records opened up. It was amazing under Mercury Records, because of Bob Holman coming out of the slam scene out of Chicago and the New Rican slam scene. And I mean, there was a lot that happened in the 90s for poetry. So then I kind of backed a little bit away, and it was more about me playing people's music and then producing. So I started the record label and put out a lot of spoken vocal tracks and things, including my own poetry. And so I think the reality of how long the show has lasted has been my love and passion for the incredibly rich amount of creativity, beautiful music, and talents that happen regularly here in New York, that never get a chance, in many cases, to be amplified over 50,000 watts across the entire tri-state area, and then into streaming on top of simultaneously streaming on the web as well as broadcasting. So I think it's that love for genuine souls expressing themselves, but definitely in a soulful manner, because I am a secret side of me is that I do love some good metal.
Can we do a part 2?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely.
Good to see you.
You too.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.